An extraordinaire.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, we're
Anyway.
live. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. It is still the 8th of January, Thursday, and we are continuing our hearings into what is working, what is not working, and what should we do differently in the housing arena. And our witness before lunch is none other than the Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development, Alex Farrell. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your haircut looks nice. It's considered- I'm gonna be sharing my screen, but I promise I'm gonna move much quicker through these slides. So if you
Well,
see some recap in there.
You're it until noon, so.
Okay, well.
You just want to get out.
Although I'm sure the committee wouldn't mind.
Well, I'll be
getting out a
interesting. How
little
about
early.
that? I'll make it interesting.
What would you do that?
The real important question is, how is baby son?
Yeah, that's what we all want to know.
He's 6 months old and I run for the legislature, so.
Oh.
From South Carolina.
It's, I need permission to share.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go, got it. All right. So, as I understand my charge, it's mostly to talk about what's working, and what are some opportunities moving forward, so I'm not going to get into any sort of recap of data or where we're at. I'll do some recap of what I know you've been hearing from Ledge Council, and so you know about the bills that have passed in recent years. It's gonna be relevant to what I'm gonna talk about in a moment. So just laying the groundwork, we've invested a lot of money. What I mostly appreciate about that, aside from the units that were created, is that gave us a chance to innovate and try things that when money was scarce, we really didn't have the opportunity to do. We didn't have a chance to try something like MER or VHIP when money was scarce in the pre-pandemic days, but we were able to try some of this. So why don't we dive right into VHIP, give you all a little update on where VHIP is at. Continues to function very successfully. The average cost is still down around 39,000. Now, the handout that you all should have received on VHIP, probably electronically, it's more than just this front page. So you can dive in and look at the various iterations of VHIP. As you know, there was RHRP, then VHIP 1.0, and then VHIP 2.0. So if you want to see how many ADUs were created, the timelines on these things, you can see in great detail what has been done. Again, VHIP has been most effective in places like Rutland and St. Johnsbury, where we know there's tremendous housing stock that's just underutilized. It also functions well in small towns where you may not be able to build at the scale of some of the larger projects that are funded by VHCB or VHFA or our CDBG funding. But you could do something like what you see right here in Brandon. I use this Brandon example, not because Brandon's the smallest town, but because this is so visible, because it's right on Route 7. If you remember this building right here, worn down for decades, this front part uninhabited for at least 20 years, probably more. There's a back section with an apartment that someone lived in. You can see now it's a 3-unit, gorgeous, right on Route 7. And 3 households who have exited homelessness are living there. Anything on VHIP before we keep going?
Yeah. Do you feel, well, first of all, do you have any sense as to how much capital on average the private owner had to put together to match the 39K average?
What we're aware of is it's roughly a 1-to-1. I believe this is actually underreporting. I believe owners are generally contributing a bit more than we're putting in, which we like because the idea behind VHIP is to leverage outside capital and leverage existing resources.
Do you think that there is I mean, we just heard Laura Lee Kester talk about problems in the kingdom. And one of the major problems that she alluded to, which cuts through a lot of what we all do, is capital, problem finding capital. Do you have any sense that you'd have more applicants if we could have more sources of capital that might work for them?
Well, yes, we would. VHIP operates as most of our grant programs really need to operate on a reimbursement basis. We have smoothed that out with VHIP a bit where it's not a lump sum reimbursement at the end of a project, they're checking as the project progresses. However, that still means you need the capital to get the project going. And so there are certain property owners for whom that's still too much of a gap. So certain.
Do you worry that if you, would it be, I mean, how would you feel about simply making it not a program that's not a reimbursement?
If the legislature explicitly gave us that authority, I could probably get comfortable with that. But, you know, we do have a duty to be cautious with public funds.
Right, so it would be, if we did it, it would be giving you the authority to do it, and then you'd sort of look at the credit worthiness and the history of the developer or whatever.
That may be, yeah. Yeah.
You have a question?
I do.
Did you-
I've noticed that part of the big beautiful bill was a new fund for updating rural, specifically rural housing. And I wondered whether that might be a solution is if a person, individual or whatever, was able to access that pocket of funding. Because though that is not a reimbursement, there's an upfront. So if they were able to, because that comes with all kinds of requirements, if they were able to access that pocket of funding, maybe VHIP could match
Right.
because of the documentation and whatnot requirements.
I'm not familiar with it, but
Just a thought.
thank you. I'll look into that. Yeah, and I can report back.
We're gonna get the budget in 12 days. And can I assume correctly that the governor's request will be that VHIP is in base funds?
Madam Vice Chair, I'm not in a position to say. Last year we did ask for base funding for VHIP.
Would the agency like to see it in base?
I can't say prior to the governor's budget. Yes. I have a lot of staff.
Like twice.
I'll be very loud as of the 20th. I have a lot of staff who are limited service
Yeah.
and who administer VHIP, not just new units, but managing compliance of existing units that go out at least 10 years. That will lose if there is not some permanent source.
And one more question. So last year and I don't remember the specifics of it. I know that we put more requirements on who would be housed with this. And am I remembering incorrectly that there was some sort of report back or?
So the new requirement as of last year was that at least 30% ends up being dedicated to folks exiting home.
That there be a report, although doesn't have a date as to when in the year they're supposed to give the report.
I know roughly where we're at with, not the report, but did we come in at that percentage?
I'm gonna look to see if it's in here. Off the top of my head, I can say we've always safely, okay, so looks like we are coming in, if you go to the second page of the handout, if you have the handout, we are coming in right at 30%.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the 5-year.
That's right. Yeah, 30% coming in at 5-year. But that is now a set aside requirement, so it won't dip below. Okay, keep moving. The Home Act, I know you just got a briefing on the Home Act. It's relevant because in a minute, I'm going to talk about all the ways that we're trying to sort of take advantage of the sort of highways created by the Home Act in terms of new guardrails on municipalities, I'll say. Act 181, in the administration's housing bill sponsored, co-sponsored by Vice Chair Bartley. You'll certainly see some adjustments that we'd like to see made to what was the Grand Bargain Act 181. I'm not going to get into that here because I recognize that's another committee's jurisdiction. I think taking sort of the big picture things and setting those aside, recognizing some of those are lightning rods, I think there are nuanced ways to adjust both the Title 24 side as well as the Title 10 side of Act 181 to say make it easier for Tier 1A communities to administer 1A. I think you've heard about some of this, don't require jurisdiction of existing permits to fall to the municipality, allow for tier 1A communities to contract for capacity rather than having to hire additional staff. Things like that. So there are nuanced ways that we can improve Act 181 to make tier 1A and 1B more accessible to more communities, especially smaller communities. Oh, and then, just to be on the record as saying that tier 1B, we would still like to see that change to an opt-out from an opt-in. I think you already heard Let's Build Home say something similar. CHIP, we've all heard about CHIP. There is a webinar, though I believe you all may still be in committee, but there's a webinar, the first of a 3-part series at 2 p.m. today.
And do you know we're having a 3-committee hearing on CHIP on Friday?
I do, I'm gonna be there.
Are you testifying or just gonna watch?
Well, I'm listed as a witness, though I think I'm a cheerleader.
Okay,
And just one more piece of context, in part, I want to bring this up because some testimony I heard this morning. The governor signed an executive order earlier in the year. The 2 items in the top left probably got the most attention. Really important, really, I think a discussion that we want to continue to have with the legislature around wetlands within this 0.3% of the state. In those areas, could we just narrow the buffers a little bit? And then energy code to fall more in line with other states in the region. So we're just not so far up front. So those got a lot of attention. I don't think those are actually the most exciting pieces of the executive order. Sorry.
No, you're good. I just, it's my understanding that there will be a Senate bill was introduced, I don't know yet. Yeah,
You on wetlands?
to kind of codify this, right?
I've heard.
That's what
it's
I-
gonna happen. I haven't seen it.
Okay, I didn't know, okay, so it's my understanding that there may be a Senate bill that is what this is, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I believe so, that those top two.
Right,
Certainly at least wetlands, I believe will be in there. I don't know about the energy code.
okay.
In both of those cases, the legislature will have a chance to weigh in because those are both going through rulemaking. It's coming to LCAR.
Right.
But I want to talk about the other pieces of the executive order, because this is what is going to tee up action within the administration and sort of dictating through to agencies how we need to shift our processes, but also bringing opportunities to the legislature in the next session and perhaps even further out. I'll start down here. Some of the efforts that are underway across the agency to look at permitting internally. How can the process be better? How can we improve the process of permitting to make it not, when we talk about improving process and efficiency, I think so often what we do is we create efficiencies for those administering the permits internally, rather than making it easier for the applicant who is actually going through the process. And as of now, working with DEC, working with HP in my department, working separately with VTrans, rather than a single entry point that can be, easily understood and accessed by all the agencies, but easily understood by the applicant. So a lot more to come there that I don't have all the details on today, but just know that this has been a tremendous effort undertaken by a lot of folks across all agencies.
I do have a question about that. The order talked about bi-weekly meetings at the cabinet level. Are those happening?
They are. Every Thursday.
Every
Thursday morning.
Thursday morning?
Sorry, every other Thursday morning now.
Every
Once
other,
weekly.
yeah. Is there any discussion in those, to the extent you're free to discuss it? Is there any discussion in those meetings? Let me back up. A number of people, a number of organizations are talking about trying to move a lot of what is now part of permitting into planning instead.
Mhm.
So that once a plan is done,
Yep.
a developer can come in and get the equivalent of a building permit, whatever you call it. But what's left out of that discussion frequently are state permits. Is there any discussion about taking the state requirements and pushing them up to the plan level so that they are not burdening the developer and creating an entire new Act 250 appealable event instead?
Yeah, Absolutely, thank you. There's certainly discussion of that, how we can extend sort of as of right or by right construction through state permitting, so it's not just happening at the local level. There are a couple different ways one could approach that. And you'll hear both Let's Build Homes as well as in a few minutes from me, a couple ways that we're approaching it currently at the local level. Know that in our discussions at the cabinet level and in this permit reform, we are trying to lay the groundwork for bringing that straight through the state level. And your point, Mr. Chair, around moving things to the plan, what that requires though is we do need to set up a mechanism for establishing those minimum standards so that we know something has met those minimum standards. You don't need to go get a permit. We know you've met it because we've moved it to the plan level. So that is absolutely part of the discussion. Before I talk about state-owned lands, that inventory for potentially developable state-owned parcels, I do want to jump down here to talk about brownfields. I heard Polly and Gus talking about the corrective action plan process. It's something that we have heard about quite a bit. It's something internally that we are really trying to coordinate with our partners at the Agency of Natural Resources to find ways to improve the process. But there's sort of two pieces to this. So there's the process of the corrective action plan and the timeline there. And then Polly also made a reference, you likely heard, to the standards, how the standards are set, soil standards, or as statute, environmental media standards. Currently, those environmental media standards are established at the Department of Health and then adopted by DEC. So what we end up with is a very high standard. So perhaps a very limited amount of soil contamination could trigger this need for a corrective action process. So likely there are projects going through a corrective action plan process where maybe in other states, if we were to adhere even closer to maybe EPA guidelines, certain projects actually wouldn't have to go through that process. So one piece of the executive order is to review that, the establishment of the environmental media standards, to take into account what would an economist say, what would housing experts say, what would a developer say. So certainly putting the health experts in the lead and understanding contamination and the health effects, but also what are the broader effects. So
in other words, are you suggesting that it's being considered that the locus wouldn't be in the Department of Health?
I believe it still would be. There'd be a midpoint where input is taken from, say, an economist, ACCD, and through us developers, and then it would give DEC a chance to modify Department of Health's recommendation.
So what do you think? Do you have any sense of time frame as to when these standards would be looked at and possibly revised?
I don't know. I can circle back. There are a lot of moving pieces in this EO that have been all flowing at once. And so where there aren't hard timelines, I think we're just trying to figure out where things can fit in.
Are you going to talk about the process now, or were you going to move to state-owned lands?
I was going to move to state-owned lands, but
I would like to just mention on process.
yeah.
Since I've already gone public with this, I may as well say it. I think that the report have you read the report that was produced?
On corrective action plans. I haven't read the report.
Okay. You'll probably notice as you read it that we requested it in our bill last year, the housing bill, Act 73 or Act
69.
69.
Yeah.
73, something else, Act 69. It's very heavy on problems that could be corrected through developers becoming more familiar with the situation,
Right.
through consultants being perhaps better, either because they're certified or something else.
Yeah.
But there isn't too much on what could really happen with the process. And I'm just hoping that your internal work could address that because there are other actors here who have different ideas.
Yes. I completely agree with that. Not to downplay, I mean, we certainly see it where, insufficient applications are submitted, and so there's something.
Yeah, not that those aren't problems,
But
yeah.
I think you're spot on that we ought to focus internally at what efficiencies can be gained there. All right, thank you. And then just to round this out, I'll talk about the process of inventorying state-owned lands, something that a lot of legislators have talked about. There have been various studies throughout the years. The object of this is to try to find, some of those obvious parcels that we probably all talked about, Virgins, Windsor, parcels that we're all very familiar with that are large, have access to water and wastewater and appear developable. Beyond that, this was an opportunity for us to look at agency of transportation parcels, BGS parcels that might be as small as a quarter acre, but depending on where they are, might present an opportunity for the state to either sell at a low cost, lease, in any way dispose of these parcels and put certain conditions on them. Where we are right now is at the understand and analyze phase. So we're looking at various parcels, trying to understand what the opportunities could be. And then the ideal next phase is to try to find some of the, say, 5 most obvious opportunities. And part of this is to develop an expedited disposal process. It would have to be in collaboration with like the institutions committees. To me, going through the proof of concept is where the real opportunity is here, so that in the future, as we see opportunities come up with these lands, we could move more quickly.
A couple of little things. One, I think that divestment is a better word than disposal. I wondered, Windsor is in my district, and I've been working really hard to try to address the Windsor Prison Lands property. One of the problems is that they need an environmental impact study, not just on housing, but on whether the infrastructure that exists at the Windsor Prison Land is actually adequate for housing. And so I wonder how that gets addressed. Like the environmental impact study does cost quite a lot of money. And so are you suggesting that we put money into things like that? When we expedite a disposal process or a divestment process, shouldn't we be giving a full picture of what is being handed off?
I understand. Nothing's being suggested right now. My task, along with BGS, is to develop what that process would look like. So likely, and I can just tell you what sort of the data gathering process was. We'll list out all of the, whether it's some sort of federal encumbrance, some easement, some other constraint to development. And then you would have to catalog those before we went any further with any analysis. So we really haven't even gone down the trail of what would divestment look like.
So again, like at Windsor Prison Lands, there is the sewer system is adequate, but the water system,
Right.
we don't know.
Right.
So I guess I'm asking you to please make sure that those kinds of details are taken into account when you consider those things.
Oh, certainly, yeah. There would be no glossing over details or just.
Not glossing over, but it's, the potential at Windsor Prison Lands is that it only has enough of a water system for today for a small number of housing units, and it's not necessarily a whole viable, but we don't know for sure because we haven't had the environmental impact study or the infrastructure study. So I'm just putting that out there as,
Thank you.
as like details to consider.
That is helpful, thank you. All right, anything else on the EO before we move along? Of course, Representative Krasnow's gone. Representative Krasnow had a hand in producing the details around housing targets, what should be reported on, and then what the information gathering should look like. So I think Representative Krasnow and probably others in this committee had a hand in that. So just to say that Act 47 and then Act 181 established that the department must establish targets, disaggregate them both to the regional and then to the municipal level, and then in Act 181 report on those targets.
Have those been disaggregated completely by town now, by the RPCs?
Not in every region, in most, and it's happening as a part of the future land use mapping process. And so by the end of this year, they will all be disaggregated because that has to be a part of your application to the LURB, and it has to be part of future land use mapping. It is required that a substantial majority of the housing targets be accommodated within a region's essentially tier 1A and 1B areas. It's not quite that straightforward, but that's essentially it. And so the municipalities have to have their targets. This is how those targets were distributed by region, and what I'm going to focus on is this far right side, because 2050 is really the timeline by which we at the State House, municipalities, regions can actually really affect the outcomes. A 5-year timeline when you're dealing with a housing economy is really hard to make a strong pivot. We can already see improvements from actions we've taken here in the State House, but not to the extent that it would hit these high housing targets. As an example, this is what some local housing targets look like. I'm using Chittenden County because they just had CCRPC had sort of the cleanest display. There's a methodology that goes behind this as to whether our community is more rural, more suburban, more urban, how much opportunity there is. So you can see, for example, I want to show you, here's Burlington, and so you can see their annual high is 427 units, whereas South Burlington's is actually even higher than Burlington's. That's recognizing that there's more opportunity for development and buildup in South Burlington, whereas Burlington is going to be more infill.
Could you explain a little bit, I'm assuming, am I right, that the county total has to be what the county total projected need is? And so is that allocated, is that built up from what town by town, or is it first established and then allocated down by town?
It's the latter. So the regions have the ability to choose their target anywhere between the low target and the high target. Every region chose somewhere right in the middle. No, I don't believe any region chose the full high end of the housing targets as their target. Oops, sorry. So the total, the total here is, there's the high end. The 47,000 is Chittenden County's high target, and you can see that they're giving themselves a range. In their future land use mapping, they use this midpoint as targets that they establish, but they allow municipalities to see their low, mid, and high.
So for example, Charlotte, that number for Charlotte that says 14, is that number derived looking at land use opportunities, and what's the role of the town? Can they say, no way are we going to do 14, we're going to do 7?
I don't know what the engagement looked like between RPC and the town in terms of negotiating these. I know they had a methodology that tried to basically assign ruralness to a community. There is also some aspect of this methodology, and you'll maybe ask Charlie Baker this afternoon, poor guy, throwing up his house targets. They are taking into account what their historic average has been. So that's what this column is. And so they're recognizing Charlotte has produced, despite having a large landmass, very low number of units. There may be good reasons for that, but they're a lot native. But the targets reflect that. Same if you look at, say, Starksboro. Fuel score, there we go. Fuel score.
Well,
That's a bad example, but they're trying to give folks a chance to hit these targets.
All right,
I just have, I'm sorry, but I need to ask a question about how that process.
Sure.
If you can just help me understand. You said that RPCs kind of designate the number for the area, right?
The housing needs assessment
Has it,
and the housing targets establish each region's allocation.
okay, let's start there. Is the allocation decided by the way that RPCs work, which is individual planning commissions going to the regional planning commission, or is it? You may have
it's the
already,
reverse.
It's the reverse.
top down.
Yeah.
because our town, we just broke 1,000 voting residents like at the 4 years ago. And we have been given 500 housing units to develop over the I guess the 2050. That does not make any sense to me, and our select board is obviously really panicking about it, and I don't understand that process or why it seems really off.
Joe?
I guess I could just share how I believe our RPC did it, which was, to my knowledge, they took the towns they have, what percentage of the population you have, and now you get the percentage of growth required for the whole number.
The percentage of growth required?
If you have 10% of the population, he's saying.
You now
get
get 10% of the growth of that full number that came up.
And it may actually be existing housing stock rather than I believe some of the
Yes.
housing stock.
Sorry.
Populations.
That's what I was wondering actually, is that, so the reason that we got up to, we had actually the highest growth in the entire state at
Yeah, these are
23% at the last census.
Right.
That represented, there were actually only 20 homes that were sold. It was a total number of 200 odd residents added, but they were people who retired to their second homes, became full-time residents. So I wonder whether that's new homes being built or new residents added.
The target has to do with residents moving in versus new homes being built, new units.
New units.
But I take the opportunity to ask Charlie Baker this afternoon, if he has more detail on how to get back to develop unified guidance.
What's housing?
Yeah. Just to show the dashboard of how we're tracking these, I'm not gonna go into great detail because this is published on our website and on housingdata.org, but just to say this utilizes the 911 data. You've heard about this, but you also included in statute last year something that allows us to work with the tax department to get access to grand list data. So we can now use CAMA data. So that will soon be coming in here. Just one more way to strengthen and improve this data as we need to report back and tell you how we're doing. All right. I'm gonna really, this is what I really want to focus on. So I know you all are largely familiar with our Homes for All initiative. You should have received some handouts on all three phases of Homes for All. The first is toolkit. You have a few up on the bookshelf there. The second being this training cohort, so taking the toolkit, creating curriculum, or in-person workshops will be this year, the first one in February. There will also be online curriculum. Those in-person workshops are sort of prerequisite to the online curriculum, and that'll develop this cohort. We're working with the Land Access Opportunity Board to create a platform so that this cohort can continue to exchange ideas and share lessons learned, like what you see from Jonah Richard with his Substack, where he's constantly sharing his thoughts, his experiences online. So we're trying to create that on an ongoing basis with a cohort. The third phase of Homes for All, which we're calling 802 Homes. This is something you heard from us about last year. We're working with the same vendor that helped us develop the toolkit to take it a step further and create 10 actual designs, building plans for 10 different units, starting with ADU, going up to 4-unit multifamily homes. These are open source designs, so any builder could access these designs. They could save time and money. They don't have to spend money and time on their developing their own designs. We are working with pilot communities to help develop these. We want these designs to fit the Vermont vernacular. We want them to blend in our neighborhoods. The pilot communities are Essex Junction, Hartford, and Manchester. We actually received over 20 applications from municipalities that wanted to participate as pilot communities here. So these communities will have the chance to help be on the front line with the vendor, with builders and developers in developing these designs. Just to say that this has been extremely successful in other parts of the country, showing you South Bend's right here, but Kalamazoo, Michigan, all very similar efforts, pre-approved, ready to build designs released to developers. We see this mostly helping our small scale developers, ideally those that come out of the Homes for All training. So in our vision, somebody could pick up the toolkit, maybe go through the trainings. They could go grab one of these 10 designs, go to their, if they're in a pilot community, go to their town office, say, I'm going to build this design. There's your building approval. They could go get a VHIP grant, and then they've developed one of these small infill units. This is an example based on the toolkit, what some of these units may look like. This is going to be the basis. This isn't necessarily what the designs will be, but this is the basis and the type of homes that we're talking about when we talk about infill. These are all Vermont buildings that you can see here. When this was developed, we sent them all over the state to various communities to get a sense of what this Vermont vernacular is, so that they can take that into account in building these designs. And this is a great example of one of those. This is a side-by-side plus one, so it's a 3-unit infill, and you can see just a little corner lot. You might drive by this and think it's a single-family home, but it's actually fitting 3 units. The rear unit there, in this case, actually being universal design. I'm gonna come back to this in a moment, but I want to mention one last thing. We have spent a lot of our time off session working with financing institutions, developers, general contractors, trying to understand what needs to happen to better facilitate offsite construction. I know you heard Laura Lee just talking about it. I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of others. There are a number of actions we could take and are already undertaking. In fact, we've done a lot of work to just educate especially some of the smaller financing institutions here in Vermont, to help get their underwriting more comfortable with offsite construction. We've already seen headway there, where some of the underwriting groups are now going to take on modular and panelized housing. There are other things we could do to, whether or not we increase the industry here in Vermont, there are things we could do to enable modular vendors to play in Vermont. Right now, they won't because, for example, we don't have a unified statewide building code for offsite. We don't have an easy way to do inspection on a grand scale. Those are things that we could change. A statewide offsite code, a vendor could be in Maine, but as long as they know that there's a unified code across Vermont for anything offsite, they could feel comfortable building here. If we could.
Question.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, would the recommendation be that it's, because I think 2 years ago, a few of us had talked about a universal code for Vermont, and that had a lot of pushback from several entities. Is your recommendation that it's specifically for offsite construction?
I think that'd be a starting point. Ideally, it would be more broad than that, but I do recognize that there's that pushback. So I think a starting point would be unified offsite code. Colorado has had some success with this. There have been a few other states that have had success.
Is there one thing that isn't clear to me? There's no building code requirement here for anything less than multifamily. Do local jurisdictions have authority to have building code requirements?
You know what, that's a better question for fire safety.
Okay,
And
rather than I speculate.
we're gonna have them in.
Yeah, Mike DeRocher has,
oh, has that been,
We've talked about. it.
okay, all right.
we stay in touch with Mike DeRocher and his team, try to make sure that they're on board before we propose. This is my last slide, but this is where I'm gonna share a little bit of a couple of the elements in the administration's housing proposal that maybe would fall under the jurisdiction of this committee. So take 802 Homes concept that I just shared with you a moment ago, the 10 open source designs that will be pre-approved in pilot communities. We'll be proposing that as of July 1, 2027, so following the pilot and then following a 1-year comment period on those designs. DHCD is given the authority to establish a list of designs that are pre-approved statewide, respective of the zoning. So for example, if we have up to 4-unit multifamily designs in this list of 10, those 4-unit would only be pre-approved in a residential district that is zoned for 4 units. So single family and duplex residential zoning districts, it's only those ADU 1 and 2 that would be by right there. But it would establish this new system where the department would have a list, a catalog of homes that, again, it's open source designs. So everyone would have a say in what they look like, and they're pre-approved. So the zoning administrator just gives an approval.
Yes,
We learned last year that that catalog, the physical catalog, would be coming out this spring because I've been waiting anxiously for it to come out. Is it gonna, I see now as of July, I'm just skimming because I'm over caffeinated. As of July 1st, 2027 is the new,
No, that's to make pre-approved.
So the designs will still be published this spring, so they'll be developed in partnership with the pilot community. So the pilot's going on now.
yeah.
The proposal is that across the whole state, regardless of whether the municipality is opted in or not, these designs are pre-approved and
Yeah.
making it effective July 1, 2027, so that there's time for a comment period.
I would just want to say, all of my municipalities love that book, the first book.
Oh, good.
And they are all waiting with
Yeah.
bated breath for the next iteration. And, but I wonder, so I would love to direct them to the pilot program in White River Junction or Hartford. Do you know whether they have a required timeline for building
No,
as a pilot?
for actually building units.
Yeah,
So the way we establish the grant agreement with those is we require that they do certain things, like we require that they make these pre-approved. We know the municipality can't control whether or not something's built. So
Yeah,
just
they
the extent
have-
the municipality can create that highway for people to travel on, that's the requirement.
so there's no benchmarks that, like, I could say, oh, by the way, next week there'll be, you should go check this out because
Well, there may be
Wow.
there may be more specific benchmarks built in that aren't coming to mind now, but I can report back on where these are.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting.
so in any area, like if the town X has a certain area that's residential, a residential zone. If these developments otherwise comply with setbacks, density, et cetera, they're approved. But most towns, the non-discretionary approval is a building permit. But many towns don't even give building permits.
Right.
Okay,
Brattleboro did this, I think probably 15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. They had a catalog
Yeah.
of, I think that's why my communities are so excited about it, because they had an actual physical catalog of pre-approved designs that fit in with Brattleboro's ordinances and
Yeah.
whatnot. And it was well publicized in our area.
Yeah. It's not dissimilar from a form-based code.
Yeah, right.
okay,
And just to say that is a stepping stone to down the road, potentially bulk purchasing of materials so that developers of these units could tap into lower cost
Yeah.
materials, because we know, a certain amount will always be used. The last thing I'll mention is trying to create consistency all the way through state housing targets, regional plans, which are required to have the housing targets, and then incorporating the housing targets in municipal plans now. This is broader than just saying the municipal plan and the zoning is required to incorporate the housing targets. What it says is demonstrate that your municipality can accommodate the housing targets. If it can accommodate the housing targets, catalog why. There's not enough developable sites, we don't have enough infrastructure. Our zoning won't allow it, state permitting won't allow it, whatever those are, just catalog what your constraints are. The long-term goal is not only to strengthen the housing targets through all planning, but to start giving the state more on the ground feedback as to what specifically the constraints are in all municipalities,
I just have one yes, no question.
please.
Do you take into account the units created by VHIP in the housing targets?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Al?
That's it.
All right, I have a feeling that this is a man we will see again. And these are in the administration's bill, right?
That's right.
Okay. I have questions which I will postpone. Thank you very much. Committee, before we go off. We will have testimony starting at 1:00 sharp. And we have 3 witnesses and House floor at 3.